Hi, my IB students. Well, here I'm going to throw light on a very important aspect of looking at psychology. Remember, if you follow each and every pointer what I'm mentioning here, you are going to score very well in psychology, and you will eventually understand that your concept of looking at the world and looking at your own behavior is becoming far more authentic. Well, I'm going to throw light on why you should understand the nitty-gritties of brain. Not like a student of biology, but like a student of psychology. And you know there is a difference. So, you've probably heard, right, that in every psychology class, you would see that the biological approach sits as a link between brain and behavior. Now, here is the catch. Well, it's not about memorizing your brain parts or hormones or genes. It's about understanding how your body's command center, which is the brain, is giving you instructions and how those messages are traveling through hormones and through neurons to shape your behavior, to shape each and every feeling of yours, thought of yours, and action of yours. So, essentially, what you're studying here is not biology. You are in biological approach. What I mean to say, it's neurobiology. So this approach is not about learning the anatomy of brain parts, unlike a medical student. It's about decoding, breaking up, chunking different concepts of neurobiology, where you would see that the nervous system and the chemical messengers are seen to influence your behavior. Well, let us be very simple in understanding this. Think of it this way. The brain is your control tower, right? The nervous system is the network of, wires. The hormones are like your couriers. It's a courier service. And the genes, consider them as the blueprint telling the couriers where to go and how to act. Visualize this. Brain as the control center. The nervous system is working as the network of wires. The hormones as a courier service. And the genes are the blueprint telling the couriers where to go and how to act. Different behaviors you would see, like for example juggling. Why I'm taking up these particular behaviors? Because they are plugged in a couple of important studies what you learn. Driving, aggression, anxiety, or even love depend on what kind of stimulus the brain receives and what instructions it sends back. Right? So some instructions you would see they are traveling via neurons, which are the messengers. Well, some move via the hormones, which are the chemical messengers. But ultimately, the pattern of gene expression decides how strong, how fast, or how long lasting that behavior will be, how the behavior is going to be expressed. Well, certain behaviors can be for a very short span. They are kind of temporary behavioral manifestations, whereas some are very long lasting. Well, some are permanent as well. So why do you need to know about? You would see that in the first section, I have highlighted on the nervous system. So the question might arise in your mind that, well, schools do not go to that depth of nervous system. You're not going to study this nervous system chapter which I've given you in deep details, but you're going to only study those concepts which will help you to visualize and solidify your understanding of biological approach. And not only biological approach, you would eventually understand that how they play a salient role in cognitive and socio-cultural approach as well. Okay, I have seen, students who try to avoid biological approach. The whole reason why they avoid biological approach is they find it very difficult. Obviously, you're going to find it very difficult until and unless somebody shows you the light to dissect your brain into small, chunks in order to understand that how each and every part of your brain is determining your behavior. And that kind of a behavioral manifestation you are going to find when you cognize a concept or when you behave in a socio-cultural setup, right? So each and every, that's what I told you in the beginning, that whatever I am telling you here, hear me out, play the audio 2-3 times and try to visualize, try to understand that what ma'am is saying makes some sense. So, of course, schools have a rush to finish off the portions, and probably some realize that how salient nervous system, teaching nervous system in one class would make or break. So I'm not getting into that, but I am trying to make you all understand that you all have a good number of months now. Even if your mocks are over, you have good amount of time to prepare for your final run, right? So each and every concept what I'm giving you here, try to read them as basic fundamentals before you could get into your questions. Okay, so you're going to find that whatever how you have learned throughout your journey of DP, I am not going to change that pattern or probably completely radically ask you to change that, because there is no point in changing something which you've already learned. So what you're going to do through this particular course is you are going to add some touch-ups. So think like this, that probably you know that probably suppose you're eating a cake and you want to aesthetically and taste wise also make the cake a little more richer. So you're going to add some refined layers or add some stunning flavors to it to make it taste more good, or probably to make it look more good. So these are your fine tuners, and while you do your fine tuners, you will realize that even your basic concepts, how you've done in school, that is also becoming more and more sharp. So now let's come on to the next thing, that why do you need to know about the nervous system? I've already told you that. So how it connects with your IBDP case studies. Okay, so let me just break it down into certain familiar research studies. Say, for example, Passamonti et al. Well, you get to understand that lower serotonin level that increases your amygdala reactivity, for which there is a stronger anger response. You see the chain reaction? So when you know what serotonin does in depth, you get to understand that why it has increased the amygdala reactivity. So it is not only talking about localization. See how I'm connecting localization with your neurotransmitter, and at the end of the day, I'm telling that it leads to a behavioral response. So here serotonin modulates the limbic system, and which you get to study in your through. Now this is the catch point. So how serotonin modulates your limbic system, you have studied. But look, when you talk about why it has created this kind of reactivity, you get to understand that this reactivity part is all to do with your autonomic nervous system, especially the sympathetic nervous system, which is flight or fight mode, right? So see here, I've mentioned the sympathetic branch here, and when you plug in this sympathetic nervous system keyword in your answer, of course your answer is going to take a different, it's going to scale up to a different dimension, because if I see somebody writing this, I would know that the person knows end to end. The person knows that why serotonin, when serotonin needs to be released and why serotonin has been released to increase amygdala reactivity, and then why is it saying that it modulates the limbic system through the autonomic nervous system, right? Okay. All right, let's come to the next one, which is Caspi et al. You would find that there is a variation in the 5-HTT gene, right? Which again affects the serotonin reuptake. Why it has affected the serotonin reuptake? So when you know about the 5-HTT gene, you would know the reason why. So it predicts the vulnerability to depression under stress. So see here, genes are not causing the sadness directly. They are influencing how neural communication handles stress hormones like cortisol. Okay? Gunter Fisher et al. We've used fMRI scans to study romantic love, correct? So you would understand why dopamine surges are found in VTA. Now, often I have seen this when you study this under interpersonal relationships in your paper 2 for attraction, this love cocktail study. I've often seen that students, they just try to mug up this particular terminology, ventral tegmental area. You would see, when I do neurotransmitter, I would specifically mention what is it, why is it important, and if you look into the deepest level of how I have dissected certain concepts like motivation, motivational movements, you would understand that why dopamine is released from VTA here and not from substantia nigra. Okay, you would understand this. So look into the nitty-gritty. Sometimes you would find, why this coursework is more relevant for you, because as a whole, you know certain, I would say, fundamentals of psychology, certain terminologies you're already aware of, certain concepts also you are aware of. So when you connect the dots, you will get to visualize your concepts and solidify your concepts to a different level. Okay, so for DP1, what happens before I handhold them and start from the basics, for them, looking at these terminologies might be a little overwhelming. But that discussion we are not having now, because anyways your syllabus has changed, and definitely I'm going to work something on for the DP1 students for your new curriculum. So that's a different thing. But for the exam takers, it is going to be very effective because you already know this. So layering it with fine tuners is going to make your life very sorted. Okay, so you would see that dopamine here surges from the VTA to the nucleus accumbens, which activates your brain's reward system. Okay, that in a love feeling setup. So look at this. It's a biological reinforcement loop. So if you do not understand biological approach to the depth, even paper 2 is gonna be very overwhelming. Okay, because paper 2 is basically an application of all the approaches you have done. It's a specialization. So you would find that in paper 2, you're going to have the predominance of all the 3 approaches. Yes, of course, certain modules would have a predominance with socio-cultural approach, whereas certain ones will have biological. But at the end of the day, you have to understand the brain. That's the bottom line. When you talk about Loftus and Palmer, look at this. It's a cognitive study which you use where you're talking about the frontal lobe, which interprets the linguistic cues, altering perception. And here, I want to reinforce, whenever you do these studies, before you get into your question answer or read your study list, whatever random study list I'm going to give you. So essentially, all right, coming to your study list, you would see that I am not giving you everything, but I'm giving you those ones where you can plug in certain interesting facts or which is going to make your understanding more solid. Those are the key studies which I am putting in the study list section. All right, so here, the interesting fact which you can plug in here is all to do with your signal detection rule, signal detection law. So look into your laws part, which is under your localization, and read each and every law or principle I have mentioned there, starting from Goldilocks to your signal detection, everything. You would see that your understanding is becoming very solid and you feel very powerful. So even in cognitive study, you see the frontal lobe interprets your linguistic cues, altering your perception. So this shows how the brain filters the incoming sensory data. Look at this. I am talking about sensory neurons. So how they're bringing in the stimulus to certain localized parts like occipital and parietal lobes through cognitive bias. Okay. So guys, the real takeaway here is, even if you are studying cognitive or socio-cultural approach, the brain always sits at the center. your ability to remember, to empathize, cooperate in a social setting, all of it begins with the neurons firing and the networks, I would say, interconnecting with each other. So, bottom line is, understanding the nervous system, genes, hormones means you don't have to memorize the other approaches at all. You can reason it out. You will write your answers that flow which are logically coherent. And you have often seen this as an annotation, whether your answer is logically coherent. So it means that there are no radical jumps between sentences. It has a smooth flow. And that smooth flow can only happen when you master the intricacies of the whys and the hows. Okay, so next time you study biological approach, do not see it as another chapter which has overwhelmed you throughout your DP journey. See it as a script which is going to help you to understand every other chapter in a much more seamless manner. Because once you understand how the brain talks to the body, the brain-body communication, and how genes and hormones tune that communication, that conversation, you're not just learning psychology, you're learning the language, the human language, how we are talking and how is our behavior. Thank you. All the best. If you have any questions, as what I've mentioned earlier, please book a session with me. I think I would be able to help you out in the best possible way. Thank you very much, students. All the best.